Thank you.
Eric.
Here. Here.
Stan.
Here.
Rachel. Here.
Here. Staff. There's Stan. Tony. Worship. Move on to public comments for 3 minutes each on agenda topics only. No comments at this time? New business, Mr. Gilbert, would you like to explain the process we have going tonight for the performance evaluation?
Sure. In addition to a number of emails I've had with Mr. Kenny's attorneys, both his civil attorney and the criminal defense attorneys, I've had conversations with both of them today. My understanding, I don't believe Bob is here. At least I don't see him. I was told he would not be here at their advice because of the pendency of the criminal case. I was also told that neither one of them would be here. They weren't sure if anyone would be here on his behalf, and if anyone is here representing him, at least that they're not apparent to me. So, in light of that fact, what the Open Meetings Act says is that a performance evaluation must occur in open session unless the subject of it requests that it be done in closed session. That is, so in essence, Chief Kenny holds the keys to whether this is an open or a closed session. He has not indicated that he wants it in a closed session to be, nor did is either one of his attorneys in my conversations today or in my previous communications with them. So what that means is that this performance evaluation must occur in open session. And if he or someone on his behalf appears, once we start it and ask that it go into closed session, we have to honor that request. So in light of that, Mr. Winship is here to give an overview of his findings. And in terms of procedure, what I would expect is that if any of you have questions for him, either as he goes through it or at the end, ask him some questions. And when he is done, then we can move on.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. I think Mr. Winship was going to do the presentation.
Good evening, Supervisor Stevens.
I don't think that's working, Tim.
Switch it on. Oh, right there. Good evening.
No?
Not yet.
A little closer.
Might have to get a little closer.
Tap with your finger.
Good evening, everybody. Again, I'm Tim Winship from the Williams firm. I want to thank the Board of Trustees for asking us to conduct the investigation into some of the issues concerning the LESO program. My purpose here tonight is to go over some of the high points. It's all drawn from the material that I showed you or shared with you when we met in executive session under our attorney-client correspondence. However, before I can make any of this public, I would require the board to go pass a motion to waive the attorney-client privilege limited to this investigation and the investigative report before I can talk about it in open session.
Okay. I'll make the motion that we do the waiver on the client attorney privileges for the investigation report from the Williams firm. Support?
I'll support.
Okay, roll call vote.
Eric.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Nicole. Yes. Stan.
Yes.
Rachel. Yes. Gary.
Yes. Okay, I think
Normally it's louder than that, that's why we're a little concerned. It's number 9.
Oh, yeah, you're good now.
Testing, one.
Yep, you're just gonna have to give a little closer.
We're ready to proceed.
Thank you. What I plan to do this evening is go over the high points of the investigation, the material that I've discussed, or material I've reviewed, and I will discuss some of the material with you. We have a projector here that's going to have some of the high points. I believe you've got some handouts as well. What I thought was most important is for the board to remember the duties and responsibilities of your chief of police. Those duties and responsibilities come from multiple sources. The first being his employment agreement. And if you look over on page 2 of the employment agreement, it spells out what some of the duties and responsibilities are. He's expected to faithfully perform his duties. He is expected to follow the rules and regulations and laws of the township. He shall devote his full and undivided time to the township and provide the township board prompt, complete, and accurate reports. If you flip over 2 more pages, there's another reference to township ordinances, rules, and regulations, which the chief is expected to follow. The 6th page it shows that they're under this agreement that the township board does have the right to terminate his employment if the board deems that there is cause for doing so. In addition to the employment agreement, Exhibit F is a copy of the chief of police job description. Was it E? Exhibit F. If you take a moment to flip to that, on the first page of that, you can see that there is an application. Near the bottom is item number 8. Can you scroll up on that other page?
Can't you get rid of that right side?
One of the obligations of the chief is his responsibility for the purchasing of equipment
No
for the
charge.
police department. On the next page, item 9 and 12, it shows that he is responsible for the assignment, care, and maintenance of township-owned equipment and property. Further down that page, in item 18, you'll see that he is required to report once a month to the supervisor and/or the board regarding activities of the department. In addition to the employment agreement and the job description, you have, of course, personnel policies. Those too have expectations, statements, obligations of all employees, not just the chief of police. On the first page in Exhibit G, you'll see that he's charged with the responsibility of preserving and protecting township equipment. He's also expected to make sure that he doesn't engage in any conduct or behavior which would make it appear to be a conflict of interest. On the next page, you'll see 8.5. Can you scroll down to 8.5? 8.50. Thank you, Chris. It expressly states that an employee's misuse of township services, phones, vehicles, equipment, or supplies can result in disciplinary action, including termination. And then if you go over to Section 9, 2 pages over, all employees, including the chief, are expected to exercise good judgment, loyalty, common sense, etc. The next page has a list of a variety of behavior or conduct which is inappropriate or impermissible. Violating a lawful duty, unsatisfactory job performance, refusal or failure to perform the duties of a job, violation of rules, all are grounds for discipline. The One policy that I learned about during my investigation is particularly enlightening. It's in Exhibit H. Exhibit H on page 2 is where the Township Board in 2006 adopted a disposal policy. And that is a specific policy that is expected to be followed, which describes what you do if you have surplus equipment. If you flip to Exhibit I, there's a copy of the policy. And this is where it's really important that you review it. It's the policy of the township to dispose of equipment in a manner that is responsible, fair, and has due regard for the interests of the taxpayers. There's a process. In order to dispose of property, there must be a request made to the supervisor. The supervisor shall recommend it to the board. And right here, no action will be taken with respect to the property until approved by the township board. In other words, you have the responsibility, or your predecessors, to make sure that when you're disposing of property, that that you know about it and that you're in agreement with it. The next, go 2 more pages in, and there's an equipment disposal form. And that is a form that is supposed to be used to identify the property, state the reason for its disposal of the equipment, and get the township supervisor's blessing before it's taken to the township board. So those are your township rules, policies, regulations that state the expectations of not just the chief, many employees. What I'd like next to have you look at is Exhibit J. This is a cover sheet that goes with the agreements with the state for the LESO program. This is, of course, the program where surplus military equipment can be made available to local law enforcement agencies. They can use it in their township or city or village. Some 300 plus municipalities participate in this program. But there are requirements in order to participate. Some of these are particularly specific. Whoever's in charge of the program for the municipality is required to enforce adequate security and accountability measures. You're not authorized to transfer any property on the inventory without state and LESO notification and approval. An annual physical inventory is required, annual. Lost or stolen or destroyed equipment must be reported to the state. Those are specific to the program, so not only do you have policies and employment agreements, but you've got these on top of all that, specifically requiring certain conduct during the operation of the program. Now what I'd like to do is give you a little background or explanation of what my investigation involved. It was quite comprehensive. I began with by reading the entire transcript of the chief's preliminary examination in the criminal matter. That was the way I could get and review actually sworn testimony that the witnesses who did testify told me. I spoke with one of the assistant prosecuting attorneys about what their proofs were and why they used or didn't use certain things. I also interviewed witnesses. I interviewed the supervisor, the deputy trustee, the clerk. In addition, I had a chance to meet with the federal agents who were on site conducting their own audit of the LESO program. They don't have any conclusions yet. I asked when those might be available. They're doing these audits throughout the state, and it won't be until midsummer when the audits are made available. I offered the Chief Kenny the opportunity to sit down for an interview. He declined the offer. He chose not to. And I went through many documents of the township. I went through lists of equipment that were either generated by the township, LESO, some were in response to FOIA requests. I went through the township's bank statements, the checking account bank statements from 2015 to 2018, page by page, to see whether I could identify whether there were any deposits of monies into the township's funds from the sale or scrapping or selling of the equipment. And what I did is I looked at anything that was $500 or more. I noticed that there were some real routine deposits for different fees that the township charges, things of that sort. So anything that was $500 or more, I got the backup documentation. Over the entire course of the LESO program here, I only found 3 instances where there had been any monies from the sale of equipment deposited into the township's bank account. And if you would flip real quickly to the last exhibit, that's Exhibit T. There you'll see the 3 items that were sold. They're in your ledger, and it very clearly shows that the equipment was revenue generating and deposited into your account. The way the LESO program operates, as I suspect you know, if you hold equipment for a year, and then you determine that it is not something the township really needs, you have the right, it's permissible to try and sell it. You could scrap it, you could do whatever you wanted to do with it really. And really the only limitation is that the money that's derived from it has to be used solely for the benefit of the law enforcement department, for the police department. So those monies have to be brought back and placed into your coffers. I only found 3 instances of those. I've also reviewed many letters and emails and correspondence going back and forth between the township and the LESO program. I reviewed the personnel files, and as you can tell, I've also looked at the policies, regulations, and handbooks. One of the things that caught my attention, probably most significantly, were copies of the annual audits. As you know, every year the auditors come in and they conduct an audit, making sure things are going appropriately. If they find things that are out of the ordinary, irregular, inappropriate, they have a section where they make those notes. So if you go to Exhibit S, go to the second page in, this is the March 31, 2017 annual audit. What this is the auditors realized that there was poor accounting, that there was, that the township was not maintaining an inventory, they weren't providing the annual inventory. The Plan Moran identified that there were property assets that were required to be placed on your balance sheet. They did some spot checking, and they found that some of the equipment could not be located. Nobody seemed to know where it was. This is, in accounting terms, this is pretty significant. It's when you get a significant deficiency like this, it deserves immediate and prompt attention. And ordinarily, you don't see it in subsequent years. You know, you're told about it, you correct the whatever mechanism wasn't working properly, and it's taken care of. But I'd like you to flip 2 more pages. And this is the audit from March of 2018. Again, you see that there is a significant deficiency in the way the Defense Logistics Agency and the Law Enforcement Support Office program was being run. And if 2 wasn't enough, they also realized it in your most recent audit. If you flip 2 more pages, you'll see that there's another entry that the LESO program wasn't being properly managed. And they also noted that was noted in their audits in prior years. So that definitely caught my attention. My investigation confirmed that their findings were correct. There were no files that were devoted really to the LASO program. There was very poor record keeping. It was unclear what was here, what was no longer here, and what happened to it. The lists I reviewed came in from various different sources. One was in response to a FOIA request. Others were pronounced from the LASO program. Some, I think, were lists of equipment that were generated here. But when it's all said and done, it appears from the documentation, the township had over 6,024 items from the federal government through this program. Now granted, some of them might be a box of 10 pairs of socks, or something like that would be in a grouping. But it also had, these lists also had Hummers, outboard motors, all kinds of dive equipment, and things of that sort. So as near as I could tell, over 6,000 pieces of equipment came through the township. My investigation also revealed that the vast majority of that equipment is not on site. There's a couple locations where some equipment is stored, some of it's in boxes and bags, but there is nowhere near the amount of equipment that appears to have come through the LASO program. And I can't explain, I don't know where it is. I can't tell you what happened there. It was very clear that my findings were very clear that the chief failed to comply with the requirements of the LASO program. He didn't do the audit, and he didn't get approval from the state before disposing of property. I also believe that there were countless instances where the equipment was not being adequately supervised, maintained, and controlled as is required in the policies and the employee handbook. In the preliminary hearing, there was testimony that a check was made out, first just scrap some metal was made out to him, and that he then deposited it in his personal account, and then there's no subsequent showing that that was ever transferred back into the township's account. There's also evidence that shows that there was approximately $4,500 that were found in an envelope in one of the storage units. There's no indication that that either was deposited back into the township's accounts. I've also come to understand that at some point he contacted a reporter to document what it was that he had found. One of your policies specifically states that only the supervisor can have media contacts. The bottom line here is that the information and the facts that I've obtained and reviewed clearly convince me that Chief Kenny violated his duties as the chief, as spelled out in all the documentation. And one thing that I think is important for you to make note of is that Exhibit R. This is a partially filled in equipment disposal form. This is, it describes some equipment. It doesn't really tell how it was discarded. It was signed by the chief. You'll note that there is no township supervisor's signature. There's a stack of these in here. Not only were these not completed and not filled out completely, they weren't in your files. Those were produced by G. Kenny's civil attorney. So to the extent there's any concern that he may not have known about the policy, I think this resolves it right there. He knew the policy, he knew what he had to do to get appropriate approvals, and didn't.
Excuse me, Tim?
Yes.
Tim, if I can jump in, you said that those forms came from his civil attorney, and I just wanted to correct the record. If you may not have been involved at that point, but at some point I received a letter from Dean Yotis, who is his civil attorney, but writing me on behalf of Eugene Lear and asking me for the township to return equipment that Mr. Lear had been given, but that he had subsequently returned. I wrote him a letter saying, provide proof of ownership, and I'll see what we can do about returning those items. In response to my correspondence, I received those forms from Mr. Lear, or his attorney. So in as much as Mr. Lear and Bob Kenny share the same lawyer, they came from his lawyer, but that lawyer was writing on behalf of recipients of those materials. And I provided those, of course, to Tim during the course of his investigation. I just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you. One other thing that I'd like to mention is what I did in this investigation is not the same as what happens in any criminal matter. Criminal proceedings, the prosecutors are required to establish a crime by, beyond a reasonable doubt. Everybody knows that that's the standard that a jury has to meet in order to find a person guilty of any crime, any crime. My involvement is just to give you the conclusions that I've reached based on a reasonable understanding of what happened. So even though my conclusions are what they are, it has nothing to do with any of the criminal matters. It doesn't have anything to do with the charges that were brought against him. It was completely independent of that, which is, I guess, what we call an independent investigation. The fact remains that I have not had contact with any of the township. I wasn't familiar with the township's board, its employees or staff or anything like that before I did this. And at the end of the day, it's my conclusion that Chief Kenny did violate his duties and responsibilities, that he violated your policies and the requirements of the LESO program. He failed to maintain the equipment in a suitable fashion or to adequately account for it. And thus I conclude that these failures are sufficient to justify discipline of the chief, up to and including termination. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
I just have one. What the investigation was between what years? Years did you all this? You compiled this information between?
Oh, I forgot. I was doing this in December. You mean for my investigation?
Yeah, where you got all the information is from 16 through 17. I mean, how many years?
Well, they cover a span of years. The bank records I looked over from 2015. The audits from 2017. These are all late events.
So the 15th through the 17th, probably.
So, yeah, but and some of the actual equipment reports were from years ago, back into 2008 to 2012.
Right.
But that's all we were able to find. And what that tells me is that it's been going, that whatever was going on has been going on for a while.
Anyone else? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
With the findings of the Winship firm, is there someone that wanted to make a motion on this guy?
May I have a second opportunity to speak to the speech? Is required.
The board hasn't finished that action yet. Right.
No.
Can't hear.
I'll make a motion. I make a motion we terminate Chief Kenny's employment.
I'll support.
Are you ready for a roll call?
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Is there any discussion on that?
Discussion.
We're under new business, correct?
Yes, yes, still, yeah.
Under new business, B, the possible waiver of attorney-client privilege investigative report prepared by the Williams firm is, if I understand it correctly, this report, the report that was viewed up there, the report that we have here in front of us, as I understand it currently, this is a client privilege report.
We waived that before Mr. Lynch had spoken.
Okay, yes, okay, that's what we did. Okay, so that means this report is now public?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so, if this report is then public, if someone wanted to obtain a copy of this report, how would they go about doing that? Is this required at this time by FOIA request only?
So, because the privilege has been waived, it would be accessible to anyone who requests it, and the means of requesting it would be through a FOIA request, which gives the township the opportunity, the amount of time necessary. These are the exhibits to the report that you've seen. This is not the report itself, just the exhibits. So obviously, anyone who makes a request, the township would need an opportunity and sufficient time to make copies of that report. But it would be accessible to anybody who requests.
At this time?
Yes. And I should indicate that while that report was not provided to Chief Kenny in advance of this, I did provide his attorneys with a list of the various issues that Mr. Winship had found, and indicated that if he appeared and wished to address it, these are the things that we'd like to hear from him on. So that's in addition to everything else that you've heard here tonight.
Right. Any other questions?
I just have a comment more. It's, I have to say that if Chief Kenny was reinstalled tomorrow, this issue would never go away. We would be in this issue for years to come. That's one of the reasons that I can support this, because the township can't move forward. I talked to Eric just today about how the police department should move forward, and we're locked in this scenario of equipment. So I can get behind this because of that, but this township cannot move forward currently where we're at.
Eric?
Currently at this time, this is a special meeting. We are in the midst of the special meeting, correct?
Correct.
And this is, we have the ability to take board action at this time, at this meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you. No more questions.
Rachel? Okay.
Can't hear you.
Just,
I just asked if we were doing board comments at the end.
yeah, we will. Get it ready for roll call vote.
Stan,
Could you please read back the line?
The motion is to terminate Chief Kenny's employment within the township.
Just for a point of clarification, is that to be effective immediately? Is that your motion?
Yes, it should be immediately, yes.
And I think you seconded it, Rachel.
I'll support it to be an immediate
Just
termination.
so that we're clear.
Roll call vote.
Yeah, read it back.
Okay, so we are saying that effective immediately, upon decisions that are made, that Chief Kenny's employment will be terminated within the township.
Yes.
Rachel?
Yes.
Shelley, absent. Eric?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Nicole, yes. Gary?
Yes.
Motion passed.
So we'll move on to public comments for 3 minutes each on agenda item 1.
Eugene Munsell, Lewis Road. I believe what you guys just did was very hard and very harsh. I think you guys, I personally think this should have waited out until after all the lawsuit stuff was done. Not lawsuit stuff, but the court findings, and then maybe done after that. But I definitely wouldn't want to have been in those shoes today. Thank you.
Charles Coe, live down here on Center Road, and I sat up here and listened to this report, which you requested and paid township money for, to continue your harassment, and it's your harassment that has cost this chief his effectiveness. You have cost him his income. You have cost him money in support of claims that you can't sustain. Now you bring a man up here who reports about all of these township ordinances and laws that he broke, and he didn't, because this money was never intended for this council. It is by the government, it goes to the police department, it is for the police department. It is not your equipment. And he is not required, therefore, to report it, or any of these other township things that you are accused of. You ought to be ashamed at this practiced and hateful pursuit of this man.
With all due respect to Mr. Gilbert and his colleague, there's an old saying that figures don't lie, but liars figure. I've seen just about everything since this LESO program started. I've followed the documents, I've followed the accounting, I followed the procedures. I had considerable discussions with Mr. George, who is the person who is in charge of the LESO program. I have copies of his policies. I have copies of his direction. Now, all of these ordinances that this gentleman has produced, I would guarantee you were never here before. All of a sudden, these are created. Now, the other question that I would have is, if these are all rules and laws that were created, why the hell didn't you guys enforce them 3 years ago? You didn't. The auditors didn't say that Bob Kenny had made the mistake. The auditors said that you made the mistakes. Not Bob Kenny. They said you made them. I got the auditor's report. Okay? Now, you go ahead and do what you did. That's fine. I'm going to tell you right now, taxpayers are getting real upset with you folks. Real upset. And you're going to be sued multiple times. That equipment does not belong to you. With all due respect to you, Mr. Gildner, the attorney of record is not Dean Yost. Now, the questions between the attorneys, that's going to be their job. That equipment is not yours. It does not belong to you. You're not going to get it. You guys are wasting taxpayers' money, taxpayers' time. You've ruined a family. You've ruined a good police officer. You've lied. You've cheated. You've done everything but try to physically harm people, except you have tried that with me, by the way. You had my car jimmied so that I would wreck. I've been shot at. And the saddest thing is, I would have defended any one of you people at any one time on a project if you had asked me for help, which you chose not to do. I'm here to tell you right now, when you turn around, I'm gonna be there. When you get in your car, I'm gonna be there. You make a mistake, I'm gonna be there. So you better start watching what you're doing. You better start obeying the law, and you better start walking softly. Because I will be there. I will file a complaint all the way from Congress on down. I've had it with you guys. I'm done.
Time's up, Rick. Thank you.
Julie Taft, Wilson Road. You may have a lot of naysayers out here thinking that you did the wrong thing. I say thank you, because there are a lot of other taxpayers out there who are sick and tired of this and are ready to move forward out of this quagmire. So I thank you. I appreciate that you're looking out for everybody, not just those that yell and scream. Thank you.
You're preaching to the quagmire.
Thank you, Julie. Anyone else? Okay. Move on to board member comments. Eric?
Thank you everyone for coming out tonight. This was not an easy decision to make. I don't think that anyone could have, or I don't think most people could predict or that these kind of decisions would have to be made during their term of office. It's a very difficult decision to come to. Speaking for myself, I have I hold a lot of values in principle and in constitutionality of this country. I've said before that I believe that I didn't really like the way that it started out, but I also felt that there were some issues that needed to be dealt with and addressed. And because we were not getting there and getting to address those issues, I suppose this is the only way that it could have happened. With that said, thank you for coming out.
Thank you, Rick. Stan?
I got a lot to say, but I'm not gonna say it. The only thing I am gonna say is that I know what the last of the LISO program, how you wanna say it is, and anywhere in there, it does not say that an individual can receive that equipment for his own personal use. It is supposed to be disposed of, and the money goes to the police department as a whole. That's how it reads. That was one of the problems we had. I thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Stan. John?
I'm just gonna echo on what I said earlier. We need to move forward here with our police department. We have just a single officer right now. It's ridiculous. We can't move forward. We've been locked into this cycle, and it's time to move forward. And although I'm sad about this decision, there's no way to move forward without a transition, a change in leadership here. So that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you, John. Rachel?
This was a tough decision, and I know there's a lot of emotions in this room right now. I know there are a lot of people that are close with the chief. I know this is tough on his family, but when you have a job, and anyone in this room knows, you have to be accountable for your decisions. When you make decisions that violate policies, procedures, there is going to be repercussion for it. When you are a chief of police, you should be very well of the ordinances and how to proceed with following those. I mean, it's in black and white, and I get this. I do not know the chief on a personal level. I've met him multiple times. He is a great guy. This isn't stating anything about him personally, but procedures were not followed, and we cannot continue to allow that in the township. You have to follow procedures. If we're gonna move forward as a township, that is why we pass ordinances, that is why we have policies. And if we allow people not to do it, they're gonna continue to not do it. And we're gonna continue to take 3 steps back every time. You know, this has been hard on me. This was my first year sitting up here on the board, and this was thrown in my face. And it has been hard the entire time on what facts to believe, what lists to believe. I've been given multiple lists, not from Lesso, from FOIA, from the previous clerk. And nothing seems to add up or compare. It's been confusing the entire time. And I question myself every day. In '08, I've lived in Thetford a long time. This has been going on since '08, and it took till 2016, 17, 18 to really look at it. Years. And me, myself, as a resident, never knew that we had 6,000 pieces. The only thing I ever knew about was the Humvees until I sat on this board. So, I mean, I understand where people stand behind it. He did a lot of great things for people in this community too. But, as I said, you have to follow policies and procedures or there will be repercussions. I'm sorry, and I appreciate you guys all coming out tonight, and God bless.
Thank you, Rachel. Nicole?
I have to agree with John, this wasn't an easy decision for anybody here to make, but we have to move forward as a township, and I just feel that no matter which way we would have went, there still would have been that divide. I mean, I see it right here, and so I think we need to do what's best for everybody, and that is to move forward. So I'm sorry that everybody doesn't like the decision, this is new for me, but I have to go with the information that I was given, because this started before I got here, and with the information that I was given, you do have to be held accountable in doing your job. So, I appreciate everybody coming out, and like I said, I'm sorry, but sometimes things don't go the way everybody wants them to go.
Thank you, Nicole. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out. Thank Mr. Winship, Mr. Gilder, and Chris.
You still only need 18 months of back pay, what are you gonna do about that?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Support.
As usual, you're.
All in favor, say aye.
Wonder why we thought you had a cowboy.